Marco D'Amico with RG Media. You can follow him at MN D'Amico. Welcome to, oh no, Sidney Crosby Mania, baby. Let's dip our toes in the Sidney Crosby waters because, I don't know, man, does it remind you of the PK Subban kind of timestamp when there was smoke, there was fire, his name wasn't going away. Lo and behold, the trade that shocks the hockey world. Are we being potentially set up for the second installment of that? The Sidney Crosby rumors continue to percolate, Marco. Welcome back. Let's talk about Sidney Crosby. I know you haven't ducked and covered as you normally do whenever we talk about him. Is that because things are getting a little bit more serious around his future in Pittsburgh?
Yeah. So, had you asked me this question 2 months ago, I think we have a ton of video evidence to see what my reaction and thought process in that was. And at the time, I did not think it was fathomable. But now we're kind of seeing Kyle Dubas basically do what I reported in February, which was fire sale. He basically, every major veteran must go by early March of 2026 is the way that this is being set up right now. So Erik Karlsson is being shopped as we speak. Rickard Rakell is being put, on display. Teams were interested at the trade deadline, and Pittsburgh asked for 2 first-round picks for Rakell. Obviously, no one was going to pay that at the time. Now, maybe a little bit different because the market is the way it is, and everyone spent all the, all the free agents are gone, so trade activity may pick up for, teams that were less willing to spend. And now, as of July 1st, you also have Brian Rust, who's full no trade protection now has become a partial no trade protection and is available for trade. So you have that in function. It's Evgeny Malkin's last year. Christopher Letang is on a retirement contract. So, it's basically at this point, does everybody think he'll finish that contract? We'll see. He wants to continue playing past that contract. They'll reevaluate at that time. But with the respect to a Hall of Fame career that he had, he's just simply not the top pair right shot D that he once was. I don't think anybody would be at that age. So credit to him that he's still as effective as he is in the NHL. But what does that mean for the Pittsburgh Penguins? Well, I think it's very evident when you see the kind of moves they made. Like, you don't do a cap broker move like they did in the acquisition of Matt Dumba,
right,
where they took on that $3.75 million and a second-round pick in exchange for Kiliachinuk. You don't do that. Another right shot D. Now they got 4. You don't do that unless there's another move in the works, right? And obviously we know they're shopping Karlsson, so you're preparing the grounds for that. So to bring this back to Crosby, well, what does that mean? Well, for us fans and those that follow hockey and anybody who follows pop culture, this would be the equivalent to Will Smith looking at the empty house on the last episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and just being
oh man.
Yeah, that is basically the picture that the Pittsburgh Penguins are painting, eventually leading to Sidney Crosby having to make a decision. And I think the reason why you're hearing more smoke about this is because there's more and more information on what the Pittsburgh Penguins are trying to do. And I think everybody kind of understands it at this point is they're the team right now outside of the ones that we know, like Chicago or San Jose. They're the team that is gunning to try to finish last to draft Gavin McKenna. They are gunning for it. And if it wasn't obvious in February when they had announced that they were starting to sell off pieces, and they sold off as much as they could, to be completely honest with you, well, now it's for real. My colleague at RG Media, Jimmy Murphy, reported that even Evgeny Malkin's name has started to surface, and he's got a full no trade. So, if you're at a point of trading cornerstone players like that, Sidney Crosby's time in Pittsburgh is kind of tied to that core. He convinced them to re-sign. And if Malkin finishes the year, like if the idea is Malkin's traded in the summer, that changes the dynamic. But if the idea is you get to trade deadline, the Pittsburgh Penguins, if they have it their way, aren't in a playoff situation. It would almost be ironic if they were.
Yeah, no kidding.
And just the colossal we're not going to take it to management, but they're going to get to a point at the trade deadline next year after the Olympics in Milan where decisions are going to be taken. You're going to go to Malcolm and be like, listen, it's your last season. You want a last shot at the cup? And so they may move him, right? And the same will then apply to Crosby. Crosby's going to be basically alone, and they're just going to be like, do you want to go? And so I don't know that necessarily. Look, I know that Nick Kyprios has reported on it, Jeff Marek, Greg Wyshynski, same concept. Everybody kind of pointed to the same situation. I don't like. We're just talking about Crosby leaving. We're not even talking about Montreal here. Exactly. I feel like he doesn't want to leave. I know that he doesn't want to leave. But I think the situation may make itself so that he will probably have to make that tough decision. Within the next year.
Well, there's so many signs that point to that, though. There's so many signs that continue to point to that decision. We're coming to that cliched fork in the road where it's either go left and stay in Pennsylvania and finish your career as a one organization guy, or go to the veer to the right. And I personally, now this is just my opinion, no inside information, logically in my head, and accuse me of bias, accuse me of being a Habs fan, which I am. I don't hide away from that fact. It makes all the sense in the world to come to Montreal and not to go to Colorado, to not go to the Western time zone. You stay in the East, you're closer to home, and let's not kid around here. He has been a Montreal Canadiens fan through his dad's connection since he was a little boy. And the other cherry on top of it, and this is more fanboy take, I openly admit that, I hope you enjoy my transparency, is that he looks at the Montreal Canadiens core. You, Prospect On, and I both agreed 3 for 3. It's the best U25 core in hockey today. And right there, top 3, top 4 U23 core in the NHL today. It makes all the sense in the world for all of those reasons that Montreal is very high, if not at the top of his list. So my question, Marco, is let's go the whole way. Let's pretend for a microsecond in time that's true. Montreal is on his list. What's it going to take? What do you think it would take in that hypothetical world that is a reality where the Canadiens and the Penguins seriously talk making a trade?
I think the only time that ever happens is when the green light is given, like, okay.
Of course.
And then Crosby will give a list of teams that he's interested in going to, and everybody should hold off on the Cole Caulfield and 2 first-round pick proposals, because when you have a no movement clause and you have no leverage, it's not the same thing. And if it's Montreal versus Colorado, for example, no offense to Colorado, but I don't think that they have much that would entertain, unless they decide to cut ties with Martin Necas and then trade him over to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh flip him for assets. That would just be a complicated trade. But the way that I see it is the Montreal Canadiens have the most amount of futures to offer. If they're in a playoff situation, their first round pick is obviously in play. So like there's obvious trades to be made here, and I think it would make sense. I don't think it's just Montreal. I think you've got to factor in LA. I think Pat Brisson. Really? I think you got to factor in LA in the situation. Although again, I think the LA Kings have done a fantastic job of nuking their prospect pool over the couple of years. I think Greentree, great pick, but I feel like this is a team that rebuilt so hard, and really all they have to show for it right now is Quentin Byfield and Brant Clark, and I just don't.
Veterans now, and
a very aging roster. It's very reminiscent to the Montreal Canadiens of Marc Bergevin's reset, and it's not by chance that my man MB is in LA. So I wouldn't count out LA because it's a very desirable market. I heard whispers of Toronto when I was at the draft.
Get the freak out of here.
Yeah, and I was like, aren't you guys ever tired of baiting fans for clicks? Because that's never going to happen. Toronto is absolutely devoid of what you would need. And I just feel like in terms of culture, you want to go to something that's on the up and up, not something that's hanging by a thread. And I feel like if you look at the Leafs right now and the way they built up their roster this summer, and I say built up because they haven't done anything really. Yeah. But they've kept the pieces that they've had. Good job, good contracts, in my honest opinion, for the players that they retained in Nyes and Tavares, but they haven't really improved their roster. That's why the Leafs are going after a guy like Erik Karlsson. But again, seems like a small window opportunity. And then you go and you go to sign, you get traded to a team like Toronto, and then obviously the big elephant in the room is going to be Auston Matthews contract negotiations soon, right? And so like that puts a pin in the idea of being able to contend on a long-term basis, because then that becomes a distraction. I think that was just an option to rile up Leafs fans, because the moment you throw Toronto or Montreal into a situation, your click-through rate goes from 0 to 100 like that.
Well, how valuable? How valuable though is the 2026 first round pick that, like the Canadiens are going to have one, giving a team, let's say, hypothetically, Pittsburgh is dog bad. They're not competitive. There's no signs of competitiveness from this team. Now they're forced to make decisions. Maybe, the poker analogy, getting more outs. And that other out would be another first round pick in 2026 to get the big one in Gavin McKenna. So let me circle back. How valuable of a trade chip is it for the teams that have a 2026 first rounder? How valuable is that to bad teams like Pittsburgh might be?
Did we see any offer sheets this summer?
0. And that's why, right?
Bingo. Yeah. For all the, we're going to see offer sheets this summer. We're going to see, no offense, but I knew this was going to happen. You were going to see threats for offer sheets. Hence, the Keandre Miller trade between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. That was at base a threat of an offer sheet. If the Edmonton Oilers hadn't given into Bouchard's contract demands, there was an offer sheet coming his way from Carolina as well. So the threat is there for teams like Carolina that's got multiple picks and multiple drafts because of the Mikko Rantanen trade. But for a team like Montreal that's not quite out of its rebuild yet, you're not going to do that now unless you're assured contention, right? Because then that backfires real quick. You look at teams that have given out first-round picks a year in advance or more. You look at the San Jose Sharks with the Erik Karlsson deal that got Ottawa Tim Stützle. You look at Phil Kessel in Toronto that got Boston Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton. You just don't want to do stuff like that, right? Exactly. And even Colorado, right? I think Bowen Byram was picked with the Ottawa Senators first round pick that was sent for Matt Duchene. So you never want to do that. So that's the reason why you won't see it. But when you're at deadline and you have a clearer idea of where you are, like if the Canadiens are a bubble team, well, then Pittsburgh takes that bet all day, every day. The reason why Pittsburgh waited to trade Marcus Pettersson to Vancouver is because they wanted to see which pick Vancouver was going to do, because they believed that if the Rangers put trade protection on their first round pick, they were hoping that the Rangers were going to give them the 2026 pick, because they had up to 48 hours before. So I think the 2026 draft has already been highlighted by the Pittsburgh Penguin as being an organizational shift for them in terms of being able to build properly. I think they were a little disappointed, in fact, of how the 2025 draft went, because they really liked Radim Murtka and Roger McQueen, and those two went 9, 10, and they picked at 11. They traded down with the Rangers pick at 12. That should tell you everything you need to know. They wanted to use both picks to trade up and couldn't, the Islanders as well, and that didn't happen. So I think they're going to use the 2026 draft as being really that draft, but they're not only looking for draft picks. They want players that can jump into the lineup as well. And Montreal has a boatload of those that are knocking on the door.
That's why I wanted to gauge the value of the 2026, because I want to see how far some people are willing to go. So hear me out for a second. In this hypothetical proposed trade between Montreal and Pittsburgh to get 87 to Montreal, 2026 first round, David Reinbacher, Uri Slafkovsky, your number one prospect. Maybe they want Michael Hage. I don't know. It's Reinbacher or Hage. One of them's going. The first rounder in 2026 is going. And where does it end there? Or do they want a warm body that they could put out there and not embarrass themselves in an NHL game? So that's where I'm getting at. If I don't know, I don't know that first round is off the charts, then you're not getting David Reinbacher. No.
If it comes down to that, you have seen players traded with no movement clauses.
Right.
They've never been traded for their fair value. Never.
Well,
And
there's
if
no
you're trading,
leverage.
voila. So why are you giving your first round pick? Sorry,
Because
why
he's
are you
Sidney
giving your top?
Crosby.
No. Why are you
You
giving your
basically
top
traded for a
prospect
money printing machine, bro. Jeff Molson is going
sure
to print dollar bills.
for 1 year?
No. Well, he's
So
coming.
what's
He's going to play
stopping you?
3 years. He'll play 3 more years in the NHL.
I think so. I think he'll last far longer than his contract for sure.
Yeah.
That man is built like a tank. But
Agreed.
the argument to be made here is you're trading all that for 1.5 year of exclusivity when he wants to come play for you. Like, look at how the Canadiens, like to the point, right? Look at all the trade proposals that we were talking about with Noah Dobson when I brought up that the Canadiens were interested in him in April.
Yeah.
And people were like, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, 3 firsts, top prospects, 2 mid-firsts, and Emil Heineman.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because situational trades make for a shift in perception when it comes to value. So you're at the trade deadline. You want to maximize assets. You want to get him off the roster as quick as possible so you can continue your descent into the standings. It's not, like if the Canadiens give up a first, David Reinbacher or Michael Hage and a roster player, I would be mildly concerned that a top pair right shot defenseman in his prime did not, and with an extension in hand, did not get that. But the 37-year-old, 38, I think he's 87 born. So 38-year-old Sidney Crosby with 1 year left on his contract is going to cost you your top prospect of first round. Like, again, as good as it is, if Montreal were in a contending position where they were going for the cup and then added Crosby, I'd see the sense of urgency there, but I just don't like, I continue to reiterate this. I don't think it's going to be to that level. I think that Pittsburgh will be fairly compensated, but if you look at what everybody thought that they were going to get for Gensel, they got a second round pick and a boatload of B prospects. I'm not saying it's going to be that. It's obviously still Sidney Crosby, but you're going to get a first round pick from a team that's probably not going to be in the top half of the top third or bottom third. Sorry for my math, guys. Bottom third of the first round. So picks like 21 to 32. I don't think that's where the Canadiens are necessarily going to pick. They're probably going to be somewhere between 17 and 20.
It's a 2026 pick. And so let's move off Reinbacher and Hage. It's Owen Beck, the next most attractive. I'm just trying to get what you think is a very logical deal between the two that both sides are like, great, this works for the two of us. Handshake, done.
I think they're going to, it all depends on what they want to do. Like, if you're trading for a guy like Crosby to be your second line center for like 2, 3, 4 years, does Kirby Dach become available? If Kirby Dach has a turnaround season, like, what do you do? Does he now become the centerpiece in a trade where you're sending an RFA that's cost controlled that can be, given first line opportunities in Pittsburgh like that? And build on the momentum that the Canadiens have with him. Like, if he has a good season, for example, then that could be the centerpiece with the first round pick to get a kind of deal like that done, where you don't touch your prospect pool and you're able to go forth and improve, and upgrade at that position. That's something to take into consideration. Or the Canadiens would feel we want strength down the middle. Maybe we keep Kirby Dach, as a third line center. Crosby would come in at a second, and you try to trade, other guys in your lineup that could potentially bring value. And so this is why it gets complicating. But some of these, and again, like these proposals, I feel like if David Reinbacher and Michael Hage are completely off the table in a Dobson trade and a Kyrou trade, where these guys are in their primes and locked in for multiple years, I would be very surprised if they would need to be included on top of a Canadiens 2026 first.
Right.
I think that package could be massaged in different other ways to give Pittsburgh what they want, because they'd be going for McKenna, but then after that, they'd want to turn it around rather quickly.
I would think so.
That's the way I think they would prefer probably more, NHL ready-ish or currently NHL players that are young that could fit into that maybe won't fit into Montreal because there's too much going on.
Right.
Like a Joshua Roy, for example. That would be the kind of player that a Dubas would probably look at because of the Hockey Canada connection, right? There's players like that who have NHL experience but can then jump into a lineup like his and play a top 9 role and, be given the opportunity to grow. So these are the kinds of guys that you'd be looking at to give in a package. But a David Reinbacher to me would be tough. I know that a guy like Kyle Dubas would like David Reinbacher. I could tell you right off the bat.
That's why don't name me the GM. Do not make me the general manager.
I feel like if you traded David Reinbacher, you put yourself a massive hole in a position of scarcity in the NHL to fill it for 2 years, maybe, with Sidney Crosby, hoping that Michael Hage eventually takes over from him. But by that point, the value of Sidney Crosby will be gone. So to me, it's like, if you listen to what the Canadiens say, it's sustainable contention. If that's the case, I don't think that I think that David Reinbacher would not be, a player that they would trade. And I would be even more surprised that they would trade a guy like Michael Hage. But I will end on this. I was adamant that he was not moving in April.
That's changed, brother. That is changed.
I cannot. I mea culpa. I cannot say the same thing today.
It seems more likely than less likely today.
Yeah, but I'm going to slow the brakes on, because this isn't something that is going to happen in the next couple of months. The only thing I'm going to say is I think that everyone in the NHL would like for him to end up in Montreal. I don't think that that's necessarily the case for him right now. And the only inside element that I can give you is I saw Sidney Crosby, face to face in the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, at the Bell Center, after the games, before the games. And I remember looking at a Pittsburgh Penguins reporter right next to me, and they were like, I haven't seen Sidney this happy since 2018. So there is something to be said. And again, you have to factor in, he's going to be captaining the Canadian Olympic team in Milan. And then they come back and trade deadline. To me, when you play meaningful hockey again, after you haven't for a couple of seasons, especially a guy like Sidney Crosby, it comes to get you. And so I'd be interested. I'm not floating out there that he's being shopped. Again, and I want to be clear about this because I don't want to be misquoted. All I'm saying is, if Pittsburgh has their way with the planning that they have to go forth, I would not be surprised if Sidney Crosby at that point said, I think it would be best for the organization for me to move on.
The thing, Hab fans, start manifesting Pittsburgh Penguin losses this season. I think on your side, from the fan side, if the Pittsburgh Penguins are garbage, if they're the dog's breakfast here, then let's see what happens. A lot of things can change. That's Marco D'Amico with RG Media. Follow him at MN D'Amico.